Hello everybody and welcome back to the channel. Welcome to Portal 1 vs Portal 2. Before we go, just know there will be spoilers ahead, including footage from the bosses and the endings. So let's get right into it. So Portal 1 vs Portal 2. My first thoughts off the bat, Portal 2 is definitely longer, but more isn't always a good thing. I feel there's more music in it, and it operates more dynamically here. For example, solve part of a test chamber like getting a laser into the right spot, and you might hear some new music ramp up. There's more characters, instead of just the protagonist Chell, who you might see through one of your infamous portals, and of course the evil AI GLaDOS, but we have Wheatley, Cave Johnson, Caroline, more turrets, some cores toward the end, and a little more fun with GLaDOS when she becomes a potato. Whereas Portal 1 was very straightforward with its test chambers, Portal 2's first roughly 20 chambers are fairly straightforward, but with this little core Wheatley trying to help you out. Portal 1 got a little more behind the scenes toward the ending when you stroll off the beaten path and actually have a quick fight with GLaDOS herself, whereas Portal 2 tries hard to have more behind the scenes action with Wheatley trying to help you, and a sequence of attempting to outsmart GLaDOS by hacking into the turret system and destroying the neurotoxin machine. So at the start, there does seem to be more content, but how much of it is worthwhile? Was it too much filler? I know people on both sides here, and I have love for both Portal 1 and Portal 2, so let's check out the categories I'll be looking at first. And by the way, if you haven't already, check out my other head-to-head video for any Metroid fans out there on Metroid Dread vs Super Metroid at the card that should pop up now! Note that I originally had both Portal 1 and 2 on PC, played Portal 2 again later on the PlayStation 3, and all screen capture recorded in this video and my playthrough was captured on my Nintendo Switch with the Portal Companion Pack. So off the bat, let's talk about the music in both games. Right away, I'm going to say that I don't necessarily love the music in either game. Both of them I would say are atmospheric at best, with the music ramping up in Portal 1 during the fight with GLaDOS. We also have the oh-so-epic Still Alive song in the end credits of Portal 1, but honestly, aside from these two moments, the rest of the time, the music can be more subtle, and in my personal opinion, not very memorable. Atmospheric and fitting, yes, but just nothing to really write home about. Portal 2 has more time to work with just in the sense that there are many more test chambers in the game, and a little bit more prominent music in this one. Though it's also fitting here, there were a couple moments where if one of the test chambers stumped me for a while, the music would start to get on my nerves a little bit, and I found that I would solve the puzzle faster if I just toggled the music all the way to being off. That doesn't mean it's bad music, just that it was distracting enough for me from the task at hand. But on its own merit, there's a bit more prominent music in Portal 2, and there's a bit more in the way of dynamic sound in the sense that you may hear some different sound effects coupled with technical sounding music, say if you're sliding around on the speedy red gel, or if you manage to place a laser in the correct spot, you'll hear a bit of a change in the music. The sound effects themselves are also very fitting and usually fairly subtle between both games, and one sound effect that you'll hear over and over is of course the portal gun itself as you place orange and blue portals all over the enrichment center maps. Interestingly enough, the sound effect of the portal gun is slightly different between both games. In Portal 1 there's a very prominent difference to me between both sound effects. If you like using blue portals as your entrance portals, you can associate that sound effect with it, and the same goes for your orange portals if you like that for an exit portal, or vice versa, or if you just randomly switch between the two. And in hindsight, that's probably why I got stuck a few times during my first playthroughs of the games years ago on the PC. Though the song Still Alive I would argue is the better end credit song between the two games, for me that's not enough to say that the overall music and sound is better than Portal 2, so I'm giving the first point for music and sound to Portal 2. So how about voiceover? In Portal 1, it's pretty much Chell, a few turrets, and the wonderful voice actress that played GLaDOS. The voiceover in Portal 1 is fantastic, and GLaDOS is delightful throughout.
The Enrichment Center is required to remind you that you will be baked, and then there will be cake.
And the turrets are mildly amusing as well. Well, the voiceover in Portal 2 is more prominent, which would be problematic if the new voice actors didn't know what they were doing. Fortunately, we have the fantastic Stephen Merchant as the initially wanting to help you core Wheatley.
This is one of my tests.
Not entirely. Look at the word test there on the wall, that's brand new.
Once again bringing her A-game along with the same effects for GLaDOS.
Over your head, which would have made this apology seem insane. That's why I had to call you garbage a second time just now.
And completing a trifecta of voiceover perfection with J.K. Simmons as Cave Johnson.
Oh, in case you got covered in that repulsion gel, here's some advice the lab boys gave me. Do not get covered in the repulsion gel. We haven't entirely nailed down what element it is yet, but I'll tell you this, it's a lively one, and it does not like the human skeleton.
Even if his voiceover direction was simply a script that said J. Jonah Jameson, it is perfect for the Cave Johnson character in my opinion, and an absolute delight to hear him yell and scream in the old factory section of Portal 2.
When life gives you lemons, don't make lemonade.
Yeah.
Make life take the lemons back.
Yeah.
Get mad!
Yeah.
I don't want your damn lemons! What am I supposed to do with these?
Yeah, take the lemons.
Demand to see life's manager!
Yeah.
If these new voice actors didn't do a great job, it could easily hurt the game, and though the voiceover is honestly perfect in Portal 1, and less can often be more, well, this for me is an example where more is actually a good thing and brings a more dynamic feel to the game. Point for voiceover goes to Portal 2.
Fighting people. He said what we're all thinking.
Okay, how about weapons and moves? Well, first of all, this is Portal, not a first-person shooter, so in both games we're even Steven having the same portal gun. Shoot a blue portal, shoot an orange portal, go through one and out the other, end of story. In Portal 1, there are some elements in solving the test chambers, getting a pellet of sorts to land in a receptor of some kind, and more often than not, using the portals themselves as a means to traverse the chambers is very momentum-centric. Speedy thing in, speedy thing out. Unless you have an aversion to heights or may be prone to motion sickness from first-person games, I find it pretty thrilling to drop from a height and fly out of my exit portal. There's really not too much else to it, aside from being able to hold on to some things, shoot cameras off the wall via your portal gun, drop them in pits, or carry cubes around, companion or otherwise. Portal 1 really shines in its simplicity, whereas Portal 2 seeks to deliver more. There are many areas where it may still be momentum-centric in and out of the test chambers, but aside from momentum and the familiar cubes, Portal 2 introduces many new mechanics. We now have light bridges, laser blocks, gravity beams that for some you can toggle the flow of gravity for, new turret cube hybrids, and these gels introduced in the factory section, repulsion, conversion, and these portal gels, all with their own functions of being able to bounce to great heights, being able to make a non-portal ready wall portal ready, and the speedy gel to make Chell of course go super speedy, which also can play into some momentum-based portal exits. The truth for me is that Portal 1 is really perfect here in its simplicity, and Portal 2 took risks by adding many more things. However, all of these new things are really fun to use and make for some great head-scratching puzzles, especially later in the game. Much like the voiceover, the new additions are fantastic, and most importantly, they're fun. Because we have more of a variety here in moves, points for weapons and moves, Portal 2. Now to replay value. Honestly, depending on game length, I may only play a game once, such as in Breath of the Wild's case that I clocked in at 238 hours, and to me was just a little too epic to play through again immediately after that. Portal 2 is the longer adventure between Portal 1 and Portal 2, with a much meatier single-player campaign this time around, but more around the 10 to 15, maybe 20 hour mark depending if you're doing co-op as well. On my latest playthrough it was about 10 to 15 hours, and definitely longer the first time I played it on PC. In Portal 1, the very first time I played, I believe it was around 4 hours of playtime. If it's not already obvious, I have love for both games, otherwise I wouldn't have made this video. But is one worth picking up more than the other one? Portal 2 has Wheatley, Potato Gladys, more hidden rooms for you to explore and lore, Cave Johnson, the old factory section, new elements for the test chambers and puzzles, and even a full-blown cooperative mode with the robots Atlas and Peabody, and it's actually pretty good. Portal 1 has single player, Gladys, and a much smaller playtime by comparison. Though the co-op may keep you coming back in Portal 2, in a maybe weird way, I find that the smaller game length and honestly easier puzzles, since a huge chunk use momentum-based speedy in, speedy thing out mechanics, can make it easier to randomly pick up Portal 1 on some given night of the week, months from now, or whatever, and play it in a single setting. Now, of course, you could speedrun Portal 2, especially after having recently beating it and knowing how to solve everything, but for me it had been years since I played both, and I loved that Portal 2 stumped me at times, but I eventually did solve all the chambers. And honestly, I'll probably replay them both again down the road because they're that special. But my argument here is that it's just easier to pick up and replay Portal 1, despite Portal 2 having a lot more content, if that makes any sense. And if it doesn't, let me know what your thoughts are in the comments below. Point for replay, for me, is going to go to Portal 1. Moving on to play control. The play control between both portals honestly is about the same, and both are great for me. In both of these, and focusing on single-player campaigns, the portal device is very responsive as far as placing your portals all over the map, and even if you aren't using motion controls as I chose to not use them, the portals generally go where you want them to go. Jumping and crouching is responsive as well, and maybe about my only gripes with control is if you're carrying something and trying to put it on a button, it may fall off unless you're very centered on the button, but you are testing after all. The only other thing that I found was if you are trying to do a momentum-based portal solution to whatever your current problem is, you might place the portal first that you're planning to jump into, and your exit portal, and have them both nicely placed before taking your leap of faith. Sometimes you might be an inch to the right or the left of the portal that you're trying to jump or fall into, and you'll simply land on top of the portal. This can occur in both titles, but the good news is that you can place your exit portal first, and place your entrance portal you want to fall into as you're actually falling, making your trajectory into the portal that much easier. And once I figured that out, any momentum-based portal events turned out to be a breeze, quite literally. At least on the Switch version, I did feel like horizontal movement as you turned was much too quick for my taste, but this was all customizable. You can also remap buttons, which I did find necessary as the default scheme I thought was a little counterintuitive, at least from whatever my subconscious remembered from playing both of them on PC and PS3 from years ago. Overall responsive and customizable to your liking in both, so this one is going to be a tie. Point for each here. On to presentation. In Portal 1, we're offered a very brief developer screen with Valve's cryptic logo showing the bald head with a literal valve in the back of it. The menu has a clean, no-nonsense interface, and customizing settings is very easy with slider bars here. On screen, it's just the game itself and no real HUD display to speak of, which is great as there really doesn't need to be one. Yes, you can actually fry from the turrets, and even see blood on the walls after getting hit, with a flash of red. But in FPS fashion, and make no mistake, this is no FPS, but you'll get your health back pretty quickly. The portals are very intuitive to understand, even if this is your first time, and the first title introduces this slowly by actually only giving you the blue portal at first, and granting the orange one a little later on. In Portal 2, the developer screen is shown again, this time with the bald head eerily turning toward the screen, and the menus are basically repeated from the first title. The portals themselves look slightly more refined, and once again there's no real HUD display, just all Portal 2 on the screen. No gripes about either style, and I wouldn't say one outdoes the other, so another tie and points for both here. Difficulty. So how challenging are they exactly? Now when I say difficulty, I don't mean I'm giving points to the harder of the two, but which one I felt did an acceptable job nailing a just right feeling of challenge. Well, speaking in terms of the Switch version, my first little challenge to speak across both titles was the fact that I thought the default control scheme seemed a bit off. Fortunately, again, as I said, this is customizable, and after I did remap the buttons, I was ready to roll. The first title can tease your brain for sure, especially if this is your first time. However, there are a lot less elements happening in Portal 1, and the momentum-heavy strategy of Portal 1 seems pretty apparent to me. A couple of the rooms are tougher than others, and I know a few people who have been tripped up a little bit closer to the end, maybe to think on the quite literal fly and change where your entrance portal was to gain even more momentum and speedy thing out. If you don't normally go for the puzzle-style games, then you might take a little more time here, but if this is your thing, you can breeze through the test chambers in no time at all. Portal 2 I find to be a little more challenging with more elements in the light bridges, gravity beams, and the gels. Some of the chambers are also significantly larger in scale, and that seemed to add to the challenge. However, at the same time, it was fun to explore these larger areas, and I always got a sense of accomplishment when the light bulb came over my head, if any certain levels seemingly stumped me at first. It's a great challenge, though the final boss is about the same difficulty as Gladys from Portal 1, and we'll get to that later. All that said, both games give a nice challenge, especially if you're a newcomer to Portal, but Portal 2 just has a little more polish when it comes to a sense of challenge while still being fun. Point for difficulty goes to Portal 2. Now the actual level design between the two is, to use a phrase, the same, only different. The setting is technically the same, as at the end of the first portal, you are stubbornly dragged back into the enrichment center before everything falls to the ground, and Wheatley wakes you back up in Portal 2. Now this will go a bit hand in hand with the actual gameplay, in that these chambers are all designed with both the portal device, chamber elements, and portals themselves in mind. Especially in the first one, I felt that the test chambers are relatively small. You go from one to the next up until closer to the end, where they'll get a bit larger, of course a little more challenging. You might have to think a little bit more to reach a solution, and then before the actual battle with Gladys, you go off the beaten path behind a panel and attempt to escape the lab, much to the dismay of Gladys. It's a very streamlined process in the first one, and part of me thinks that Valve was playing it safe, as they probably were well aware they had something special on their hands and didn't want to overdo it. Or maybe they wanted to make a release date or something, but either way, the first title offers a streamlined stage after stage setup before the very end. Levels are cleverly designed, although for anyone that's not a fan of the momentum pattern, they might not like it. Personally, I am a fan of that, or heights in the virtual setting anyway, and I find it more thrilling than anything else. The levels also never really feel overbearing, although there is a section very close to the end that may throw some people for a loop, as it's a very towering room in comparison to everything you've seen before it, but I felt it also made it abundantly clear that you're coming toward the end and created some anticipation to meeting Gladys face to face. To sum up Portal 1, run through a test chamber, find your solution, ride the elevator to the next test chamber. Eventually, go behind the scenes and attempt to battle your way out of the lab. The sequel then expands on the first with the new puzzle elements, while still keeping the formula mostly the same. You wake up in a tiny room, and you pretty quickly once again start the testing process. This time though, the levels are a bit more dynamic, as the enrichment center repairs itself as you traverse the earlier levels, and eventually becomes fully operational once again. However, due to the aftermath of the first events, you'll see a lot more behind the scenes between levels, and aside from the new elements, the chambers can have a much larger feel this time around. It's also nice that with many more testing areas here, you'll move from various sections from the earlier chambers repairing themselves, to the fully operational lab, to the old factory section where the gels are introduced, to the lovingly referred to Wheatley Laboratories toward the end of Portal 2. The larger chambers can be intimidating, and a few of them would be probably easier if they were just scaled down. But the point of Portal isn't to be overly easy. With many new elements, larger chambers, different sections, and more steps involved in finding solutions to chambers, point for level design is going to Portal 2. Okay, so now that you've been watching all the pretty graphics, unless you're listening to this podcast style or something, or working out or playing another game or whatever while you listen, hey, I do that all the time, let's chat quickly on the graphics anyway. They're nice! These are old games, relatively speaking, and basically ports, and the character model of Chell isn't anything to write home about, but some of the chambers feel a little timeless to me in the sense that we're dealing with a lot of polygonal shapes anyway, sort of like how Star Wars games always look great these days to me, but when you think about that, all the ships and everything are always diamonds or X's, etc. Of course, not everything is a block or a companion cube, as we also had the gel, which was pretty nice looking in Portal 2, and the portals looked a little more refined, even if I do prefer the sound effect of them in the original title. Wheatley's little blue eye seemed like it could use a little work, but other than that, Portal 1 is a little more static in terms of the visuals. The actual graphics per se don't really outshine the original, but I do find the second more visually stunning in that many of the chambers are more exciting to actually look at, with things moving around, so even though we're not comparing Unreal Engine 4 to 5 or anything like that, I just like looking at Portal 2 a little bit better. Point for graphics goes to Portal 2. So now let's briefly talk about boss design. In Portal 1, we reach Gladys at the end and have a fairly simple fight where we just need to create a couple portals to have these rockets being fired at us, exit out a portal, hit Gladys a few times within a time limit, and that's it, you've beaten Portal 1. Gladys is great throughout the game, and her wit remains as she fights you and begs you to not push the button, and there's the time limit, which I do find a little bit annoying. It's a bit odd even having a boss, I think, but since it's pretty easy to figure out how to beat or solve this last puzzle in a way, at least it's not overbearing, but compared to the rest of the game, I'd say the final bosses in both cases are probably the weakest points of the games. Wheatley in Portal 2 is very similar to GLaDOS in Portal 1, except this time we have a few cores we need to attach to Wheatley before we send him off into space. Since he basically has GLaDOS's body now, the literal boss design is not super different, and the fight is similar too. If you're not paying attention, by the time you have to attach the third core, you may not see a pipe burst and Speedy Gel cover the floor, where you'll have to one more time do a speedy thing in, speedy thing out maneuver to get the last core on with the help of your trusty Potato GLaDOS at your side. Both fights are very similar to me, and I don't find one particularly better than the other. And in my humble opinion, both bosses are kind of weak, but I'm also not upset they're there either. Boss design is going to be a tie, so points for both here. Now to briefly talk about the story behind both. I'm not sure if this is even fair to look at, as the two games together form the whole story, and as we've all seen at this point, I think there's a lot more revealed in the story and lore in the sequel between GLaDOS, Cave Johnson, Caroline, and Chell, dangerous mute lunatic that she is. So just quickly talking about the stories, on surface level in Portal 1, Chell wakes up and GLaDOS tests her over and over for science! Eventually, GLaDOS tried to kill Chell in a fire, and once Chell sees GLaDOS, it's pretty clear, if it wasn't already, that GLaDOS killed everyone in the lab using her deadly neurotoxin. After GLaDOS explodes, Chell finds herself outside only briefly and is dragged back into the lab. In Portal 2, Chell wakes back up in the Enrichment Center and begins to test again fairly quickly, but much more is happening here. The core Wheatley is introduced, only later revealed that he was intentionally designed as a moron, and who better to tell him this than Gladys? Finding some more hidden areas might reveal wall scribblings and some comic book lore referencing one of Aperture's employees, Doug Ratman, who wanted to warn Chell about Gladys in the first place. And once you reach the depths of the old factory section, Cave Johnson reveals himself to be kind of a psychopath with all the failed testing as he slowly destroys his own company. And of course, he reveals his secretary Caroline, whose mind was transferred into the AI that we all lovingly know as GLaDOS. Eventually, after defeating Wheatley, GLaDOS gets her body back, deletes all traces of Caroline, and sends Chell outside so they don't have to deal with each other anymore. Chell gains her freedom before our old friend the Companion Cube is spat out of the door and promptly slammed shut. Wheatley floats off into space, a bit remorseful, and claims he's sorry. Altogether, it makes for a fun story. And there's also Peabody and Atlas in the co-op campaign, the promises of cakes and parties, and altogether it's a fun and original story combined. But more of it is just simply revealed in Portal 2, so point for story goes to Portal 2. So that leaves our last category, and by now it's pretty clear who the winner is. But to briefly talk about gameplay and fun factor, and while we already sort of talked about this in terms of play control and how they are very similar, there's more new elements in Portal 2 and they all work really well. Even if you don't like the story, what matters in the game at the end of the day is if you're enjoying the experience, if you're having fun, and while both are enjoyable, there's simply more to do in Portal 2. There's more story revealed, there's more music happening, and a bit more awe when you walk in the behind-the-scenes sections, and especially once you traverse the old factory section, as they cleverly have Cave Johnson tell you all about the history of Aperture Labs. Portal 1 is an absolute blast to me. Had some great quotes, fun puzzles, even if most of them are momentum-based, introduced the portal gun and GLaDOS in the first place, and has to me a cult classic end credit song in the form of Still Alive. Portal 2 at the end of the day though just has more, and every bit of it to me works really well and is fun. I still have fun falling down great heights and flying out exit portals, bouncing around on repulsion gels, laughing at Wheatley's lines, especially the part where he kills you.
This is the part where he kills us.
Hello! This is the part where I kill you!
And being able to go back to these games later with a somewhat fresh start, having forgotten the chambers and the puzzles for the most part, it was so rewarding going through these games again. I have love for both Portal 1 and Portal 2, and while both are a triumph, I would say if I had to pick between the two, I've got to give one more point to Portal 2 for gameplay and fun. And thanks to Valve for giving us, in my opinion, two of the greatest games around. You could say, it's hard to overstate my satisfaction. Okay, I'm out. Winner is Portal 2. Thanks everybody so much for watching. If you like the content, click subscribe, like, and comment. Let me know your thoughts on Portal 1, Portal 2, whatever you're playing on your Switch or whatever's going on. And I'll catch you in the next video.
This was a triumph. I'm making a note here, huge success. It's hard to overstate my satisfaction.